Sir, your son's been taken to the boat. Please, you have to go save him now. The words cut through the balmy harbor air like a shard of glass. John Mackenzie stopped mid-stride, his polished shoes grinding against the dock's planks. He turned toward the voice, startled, annoyed, until his eyes fell on her. She couldn't have been more than 12, barefoot, dark-skinned, with a cascade of tight curls barely held by frayed red ribbons. Her name would come later, but her defiance was immediate. "What did you say?" John asked, voice cool but sharp. "I said, your son Daniel is being taken onto that yacht." She pointed at the sleek white vessel pulling away slowly into the bay. "He didn't want to go." Behind him, a sharp breath drew his attention. Lydia, his wife, poised as always, stood frozen beside him, her manicured hands clutching her pearl necklace a little too tightly. Her eyes flicked to the girl, then to John, wide and pleading. "John," she said, voice trembling. "She doesn't know what she's talking about. Don't listen to her." John furrowed his brow. "How would she know, Daniel?" "She's a child," Lydia snapped, probably confused, maybe mentally disturbed. "Can someone?" She gestured at the nearby marina staff. "Wait," John said, but it was too late. Two uniformed security guards appeared, summoned by her silent signal. They moved toward the girl. "Sir," one of them said to John, "we've been asked to remove this individual from the dock." The girl didn't flinch. "I'm telling the truth. He's your son. He didn't want to go." "That man, your other son, told Daniel it was a vacation, but he lied." John's jaw tightened. "Stop." Lydia turned to him, panic creeping into her voice. "Darling, she's harassing us in public. Let them handle it." He ignored her. "What's your name, young lady?" "Maya," she said proudly. "And I'm Daniel's friend." The guards hesitated. John's voice grew firmer. "Nobody take her." Lydia's lips tightened. "You're not seriously listening to this street girl." Maya's eyes flashed. "I have proof." That silenced them. She reached into her faded backpack and pulled out a small battered smartphone. "The dock guard at Southgate let me review the cameras. I made him save the footage." John blinked. "Footage? You can see it all. Daniel crying. Lucas putting him on the yacht." The name hit like a blow. Lucas, John's second son. The brilliant, ambitious one. The heir apparent. The boy who was always 5 steps ahead. Always polished. Always calculated. Lydia stepped forward, her voice trembling. "This is absurd. Lucas would never." Maya didn't back down. He smiled while he did it. John turned to his wife. "Did you know about this?" She froze. "Maya," he said, voice now calm but charged with steel. "Where is the guard?" "Southgate?" She repeated. "Name's Harold. He said he'd keep the footage safe." John looked out at the horizon. The yacht was a speck now. He felt something terrible settle in his gut. "Come with me," he said to Maya. Lydia grabbed his arm. "John, this is ridiculous. You're letting some dirty orphan drag you into chaos." He pulled away. "You're either with me, Lydia, or in my way." In a world where silence often wins, Mia chose to speak. Her courage didn't just change the course of one life. It reminded us all of the quiet power of doing what's right. If you felt even a glimpse of Maya's kindness and bravery, leave a heart in the comments to show your love. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the BUP Stories channel for more powerful stories that restore your faith in humanity. The color drained from her face. Maya followed close behind as John strode down the dock, fury and disbelief building with every step. His mind raced. Lucas had the means, the access. Daniel, though developmentally impaired, was still his blood, his legal heir, his weak link, and John, blinded by pride, had trusted too easily. As they neared Southgate, a large security guard in his 50s straightened up. "Mr. Mackenzie." Yes, I've got it on USB, Harold said, eyes grim. Didn't feel right. That boy, he didn't want to go. John took the drive, heart pounding. You'll give a statement? Harold nodded. Name the time. Maya looked up at John. I told you. He exhaled. You did, and you might have just saved his life. In that moment, as the sun bled gold over the water, John Mackenzie realized two things. He had almost lost everything, and his own house had become a battlefield. The USB drive felt heavier than gold in John Mackenzie's hand. As he and Maya stepped into his black Lincoln Town car, the silence between them throbbed with the weight of what had just happened. Mia sat quietly, her knees drawn up, sneakers dusty and worn. John didn't say a word until they pulled away from the marina. You did the right thing, he said at last, eyes fixed on the road ahead. I know, Maya replied without arrogance. I just didn't think you'd believe me. He glanced at her. To be honest, I didn't. She nodded. Most grown-ups don't, especially the rich ones. John winced. The truth in her words stung harder than her tone. He was used to being surrounded by professionals, people who smiled tightly and said what he wanted to hear. Maya was none of that. She was real. Back at the Mackenzie estate, John walked through the grand foyer as if it were a stranger's house. Lydia wasn't home. That gave him time to verify, to confirm, to face the storm building in his chest. He led Maya into his private study, a room adorned with dark oak bookshelves and family portraits. The newest painting, Lucas standing beside him, Daniel seated quietly in the background, now looked more like a prophecy than a memory. John plugged in the USB and opened the file. The footage was grainy, the angle slightly off, but what it revealed was undeniable. Daniel, wearing his favorite red jacket, stood at the edge of the dock, nervously clinging to a stuffed bear. Lucas knelt in front of him, speaking softly. Daniel shook his head. Lucas gripped his arm harder. Then, without looking around, he signaled two men in crew uniforms. They approached. Daniel resisted. Lucas stepped back. The crew lifted Daniel and led him onto the yacht. And Lucas smiled. A slow, quiet smile that chilled John to his core. He paused the video. Maya, watching beside him, whispered. He knew what he was doing. John's hand trembled. He's my son, my God, but not your heir, Maya said. Matter of fact. He turned to her sharply. What do you mean? I heard him once on the phone. Lucas, he said something about removing the liability and securing the legacy. He thought I wasn't listening, but Daniel was right there with me. John stood up, pacing the room, his temples throbbed. Lucas was always driven. But I thought he just wanted to prove himself. He wants it all, Maya said. And Daniel's in his way. The next morning, John moved fast. He called in his legal advisor, Raymond Wolfe, a former federal prosecutor with a quiet voice and a mind like a steel trap. Within 2 hours, Raymond had secured a judge's emergency order to freeze Lucas's access to all family trust accounts and halt any business transfers pending investigation. Meanwhile, Maya was fed a warm breakfast in the sunroom, the first real meal she'd had in days. John sat with her, watching her eat as if she were the last honest witness to a house built on lies. What about Daniel? She asked between bites of scrambled eggs. We'll get him back, John said. And I'll make sure he never feels afraid again. Later that day, a security team deployed by Wolfe's contacts tracked the yacht's GPS signal. Lucas had diverted it from its planned Mediterranean cruise route and was now anchored near a private estate in the Florida Keys, a property John vaguely remembered buying as a tax shelter years ago. Of course, he'd used something I forgot existed, John muttered bitterly. But what disturbed him more was what Wolfe discovered next. Lucas had contacted an estate lawyer in Miami ominous about transferring power of attorney over Daniel's medical care and declaring him mentally unfit for any inheritance decisions. Paperwork's ready, Wolfe said, tapping his iPad. All he needed was a fabricated emergency which he created. John stared out the window. My son tried to erase his own brother. No, Ma said from the corner, her voice small but firm. He tried to erase the only person who didn't care about his titles. That night, John sat in the leather armchair in his study and held a photograph of Eleanor. Her gentle eyes looked back at him, full of the same clarity Maya had shown. He could almost hear her voice. "Don't let the Empire cost you our son." He whispered, "I should have seen it." Behind him, Maya appeared in the doorway. "You couldn't. People like Lucas, they wear masks all the time. But Daniel, he's never had one." John nodded. "That's what makes him stronger than all of us." He reached into his drawer and pulled out an old watch. Daniel's favorite, a relic of their last trip together when they sat on the beach in Santa Cruz, building sandcastles and letting the world go quiet. "I'm going to Florida," he said. Maya stepped forward. "I'm coming, too." He looked at her surprised. "You're 12. I'm his friend." He smiled faintly. "I suppose I can't argue with that." She grinned. "Besides, someone has to make sure you don't let another liar get away." Outside, the sky turned bruised purple as a storm gathered over the ocean. And inside, for the first time in years, John Mackenzie was no longer just a businessman, a husband, or a name on a tower. He was a father, and he was going to war. The private jet landed smoothly at Marathon Airport just as dawn began bleeding over the Florida Keys. Palm trees swayed gently in the morning breeze, casting long shadows across the tarmac. John Mackenzie stepped off first, sunglasses shielding eyes that hadn't truly rested in days. Behind him, Maya clutched her backpack tightly, her sneakers tapping softly against the steps of the plane. A black SUV waited. Raymond Wolfe stood by the door, briefcase in hand, his tie already loosened against the thick coastal air. "The property secluded," Raymond said once inside. Surveillance drones picked up 2 guards, unarmed, but likely trained. "Lucas is inside with Daniel. From what we can tell, your son hasn't been harmed physically." John nodded. "That's not good enough." Mia leaned forward from the back seat. "Does Daniel know we're coming?" "No," Wolf replied. "Lucas has likely kept him isolated. Our drone caught images of Daniel near the back veranda, but there's no sign of communication devices. No phone, nothing." John's hands clenched into fists. "This ends today." The car wound through tight roads flanked by mangroves before reaching a private gate nearly overtaken by sea grapevines. John stared at the rusted ironwork. He had bought the estate years ago on a women's investment property that he'd never cared to visit. And now it had become a cage for his most vulnerable child. "Open it," he said. Raymond keyed in a code. The gate creaked open slowly, revealing a sprawling Spanish-style villa with terracotta tiles and faded shutters. A modern yacht bobbed lazily at the dock beyond the property, its hull gleaming under the rising sun. 2 men in khaki uniforms appeared on the porch. One moved toward the SUV as it rolled to a stop. Before he could speak, John stepped out, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "I'm John Mackenzie, and that's my house." The man hesitated. "Mr. Mackenzie, we were instructed." John cut him off. "If you obstruct me, I will consider you complicit in a kidnapping. Are we clear?" The man's jaw tightened. He stepped aside. Maya climbed out, her eyes darting around the estate. "It's too quiet," she muttered. Inside, the house smelled of salt and lemon polish. Lucas stood in the grand room, sleeves rolled up, sipping from a crystal tumbler, as if he'd been expecting them. "Dad," he said, flashing a smile too polished to be sincere. "What a surprise." John took 2 steps forward. "Where is he?" Lucas arched an eyebrow. "Daniel, resting. He's been anxious. I thought a little sea air would help." "You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" John's voice was a quiet storm. "You drugged him. You forged travel records. You isolated him. And you dared to smile while doing it." Lucas set his glass down. "He's not safe in that house. You know it. The staff pity him. The board members whisper behind your back. He's fragile. He's a liability. He's my son. John snapped. My blood. You betrayed both him and me. Lucas stepped closer, his eyes cold. You were going to hand everything to him. A boy who can't sign his name without help. I've bled for this company. I've earned. You've earned nothing, John said. You plotted like a coward. Manipulated your stepmother. Used a mentally challenged brother to claw your way up. Lucas sneered. This isn't a family. It's a brand. And brands survive by cutting dead weight. A sharp intake of breath came from behind them. Daniel stood at the top of the stairs. His red jacket hung loose around his thin frame, his favorite stuffed bear clutched to his chest. His expression was confused, scared, but not broken. Dad, he asked softly. John turned instantly, his voice gentling. Daniel, it's me, buddy. Lucas moved first toward Daniel. Don't, Mia said, stepping in front of him. He stopped, startled by the fire in her eyes. Daniel descended the stairs slowly. He told me we were going to Disneyland, but there's no rides here. John opened his arms. Daniel rushed into them, burying his face against his father's chest. For a moment, all the pain, the lost years, the lies, the guilt melted into a quiet reunion. Lucas's voice broke the silence. You're making a mistake. John looked up, his voice low and lethal. I made the mistake of trusting you. Raymond stepped forward, handing Lucas a folded set of documents. You've been removed from all executive positions. Effective immediately. The board has been notified. Federal charges are being considered. Lucas's hands trembled. You'd throw away your legacy for this? John looked at Daniel, who was now smiling faintly, his fingers entwined with Ma's. This is my legacy, he said. Police arrived shortly after, taking Lucas into custody without incident. He didn't look at his father again. As the sun rose higher over the estate, John, Daniel, and Maya stood together on the veranda. The breeze carried the scent of salt and orange blossoms. Daniel laughed quietly as Maya showed him a seashell she'd picked up near the dock. You came for me, Daniel whispered. John placed a hand on his shoulder. Always. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a businessman or a widower or a man with something to prove. He just felt like a father. The return flight to New York was unusually quiet. John sat with Daniel asleep on his shoulder. Maya curled beside them with a comic book she'd picked out at the airport gift shop. The drone of the engines was a dull comfort, but John's mind was anything but still. Lucas was in custody facing charges ranging from conspiracy to fraud and possibly unlawful detainment depending on how the prosecutors classified Daniel's removal. Raymond Wolfe had assured John that the legal process was under control. Yet what knotted John's heart wasn't the courtroom or the headlines that would come, but the question, how did I let it go this far? He looked at Maya, who turned a page with quiet focus. She had been the crack in the dam, small, uninvited, unexpected, but the only one willing to shout the truth when no one else would. And Daniel, poor Daniel, his soft breaths, his fingers still clinging loosely to John's shirt, reminded him that innocence could be fragile, but it could also survive. Still, the boy had changed. There was more silence behind his eyes now. The kind of silence born not of disability, but of betrayal. When they landed, the estate was surrounded by press. John ordered the gates sealed, and a private firm placed discreet protection around the property, not for his sake, but Daniel's past. Inside the house, familiar portraits now seemed like masks. Lydia was gone. She had left shortly after John's confrontation with Lucas, leaving a one-line note on monogrammed stationery. I'm sorry, but I cannot be part of this anymore. John didn't argue. Her loyalty had always pointed in the direction of stability, not truth. In the days that followed, John and Daniel fell into a quiet routine. Mornings were for puzzles, afternoons for walks in the rose garden. At night, John read aloud from old books, classics that Eleanor used to love, until Daniel fell asleep. Maya stayed in the guest house. John offered her a room in the main home, but she refused gently. I like small spaces, she said. They feel honest. Raymond visited frequently, updating John on Lucas's legal situation. He's already angling for a plea deal, Raymond reported one morning over tea. But we're pressing for full charges. Too many people in your circle enabled him, and I think he counted on your name protecting him. John nodded. No more. That afternoon, Maya came into the study carrying something. It was a folder tattered labeled in a child's handwriting for D. I found this in Daniel's room, she said, placing it on the desk. He said it was from before his mom died. John opened it slowly. Inside were drawings, crude but heartfelt stick figures of a family, a tall man, a woman with long hair, and a smiling boy. In one, the boy held a rocket ship. In another, he stood beside a tree labeled home. John's hands trembled as he flipped through each page. He remembered more than we thought, Maya whispered. John closed the folder and looked at her. He never forgot. That night, Daniel had a nightmare. John rushed into his room, finding the boy thrashing in his sheets, mumbling, "Don't leave me." Not again. He held him close until the shivering stopped. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Afterward, John sat beside his son's bed, watching the rise and fall of his chest. He realized then that healing wasn't a one-time event. It was a series of small promises kept. The next morning, John made a decision. At breakfast, he placed a document on the table in front of Maya. She blinked. What's this? A trust, he said. For you. I don't need your money, she replied quickly. I know, he said, smiling faintly. That's why I trust you with it. For your education, your living, and a position in the foundation I'm creating in Eleanor's name, the Truth Watch. It'll fund investigations, protect whistleblowers, support kids like Daniel who need a voice. Maya looked at him, startled. You're serious, deadly. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. Thank you for everything. No, John said, his voice soft. Thank you for saving my son and me. As the sun broke through the kitchen windows, Daniel walked in holding a new drawing. He handed it to John. In it, 3 figures stood side by side. A tall man, a smiling boy, and a girl with wild curls. Beneath them, in Daniel's uneven letters, were the words, "My family now." John framed the drawing that very day, hung it in the main hallway where the old Mackenzie family portrait once stood. Because legacy, he had learned, wasn't about bloodlines or business. It was about who you fought for when the truth came knocking. The first board meeting since the scandal was set for a Tuesday morning. Crisp and gray, with rain tapping lightly against the glass windows of Mackenzie and Lang's towering headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. John hadn't set foot in that building for nearly 2 months. His last appearance had been as chairman and father. This time he came as something else, truth's custodian. The elevator ride to the 52nd floor was silent. Raymond stood beside him, folder in hand, and Maya, fresh in a navy blazer 2 sizes too big, clutched a notepad with scribbled questions. She insisted on coming. If they talk about Daniel or pretend none of this happened, someone needs to look them in the eye, she'd said. John had agreed. The doors opened to a dozen familiar faces seated around a curved oak table. Men and women he'd worked with for decades, some older than him, some younger and more dangerous. They stood when he entered, though their expressions were mixed. Sympathy, apprehension, and veiled skepticism. Mr. Mackenzie, said Douglas Heath, the interim chair during John's absence. We're glad to have you back. Let's not pretend it's that simple, Doug, John replied calmly, removing his coat. You've all seen the headlines. A murmur passed around the room. No one spoke. John remained standing. My son, Lucas, exploited his position to illegally detain his brother. He conspired to shift control of this company by manipulating my absence and Daniel's condition. I'm not here today to sweep that under a rug. He paused. I'm here to draw a line. Raymond stepped forward and handed out documents. These, he said, are declarations supported by surveillance footage, sworn statements, and court filings. Lucas has been formally removed from all Mackenzie and Lang legal and executive positions. His shares are now in blind trust pending full investigation and probable conviction. A man down the table, Clayton Fromer, cleared his throat. With respect, John, we understand the personal weight of this situation, but some of us are concerned about optics, investors. Confidence in leadership. Confidence? John repeated. He stepped closer to the table. You mean the confidence that let a board member's ambitions grow unchecked? That turned a blind eye to Daniel's erasure, or the confidence that no one would question what happened at the docks? Mia stood up suddenly. Her voice shook, but not from fear. He was going to throw Daniel away like he didn't matter. And you all, she looked around. You let him. A few heads lowered. No one interrupted her. John's voice softened. Daniel may not run this company, but he represents what we stand for or claim to. If we discard the vulnerable to protect the powerful, we are no longer a business, we're a machine. I won't lead that. A moment of silence passed. Then Douglas spoke again. So, what do you propose, John? John looked to Maya, then out the window, where the skyline blurred with drizzle. A restructure, immediate internal audit, board rotation over the next year, and a foundation arm embedded in our ethics division staffed not by legal counsel, but by people like Maya. People who ask questions no one else dares. Gasps, raised eyebrows. Fromer sputtered. You're suggesting a child oversee our ethics department? John smiled faintly. I'm suggesting someone with moral clarity, something most of you gave up for quarterly returns. Raymond added. The bylaws support foundation appointments as honorary positions. It's legal and long overdue. The room shifted, some in discomfort, some in respect. By the end of the hour, it was done. John left the room with Maya and Raymond flanking him, not as subordinates, but as partners. Outside, the rain had stopped. Back at the estate that afternoon, Daniel was in the garden. He was planting something lavender. By the looks of it, his caretaker, a kind woman named Belinda, stood nearby with gloves and watering cans. Lavender for Mom, Daniel said when John approached. She liked the purple. John crouched beside him. She did. So do I. Daniel looked up, eyes soft. Did they stop him, Lucas? John nodded. He won't hurt you again. Daniel went back to patting the soil. I didn't like him. He smiled too much with his mouth, not his eyes. John smiled. You saw what I didn't. Daniel grinned. You were sad. Sad people forget to look sideways. Maya, watching from a few feet away, chuckled. You're pretty smart for someone who hates spelling. Daniel stuck his tongue out. And for a second, they were just kids again. No legacy, no lawsuits, just friendship and a world finally making room for them. That night, John sat by Eleanor's photo in the study. He poured a glass of her favorite wine and raised it quietly. I didn't get it all right, he whispered. But I got them home. In the hallway, Daniel's drawing hung beneath a soft light. The three of them, him, Maya, John, hand in hand. And beneath in Maya's neat handwriting, a new caption had been added. Family is who stands with you when no one else will. The first article dropped quietly, just a short piece buried in the lifestyle section of a mid-tier online magazine, Moral Reckoning of Mackenzie and Lang, a father stand. It mentioned Daniel, only briefly referenced John's speech before the board, and painted the story as a tale of redemption. But the story wouldn't stay quiet for long. By the end of the week, 3 major outlets had picked it up. One led with a headline that made John cringe. The billionaire who chose his disabled son over power. He hated the word disabled used that way, flattening Daniel into a symbol, stripping away his humor, his gentleness, his capacity to sense people better than most. Still, the public attention meant something larger. The story had struck a nerve, and now it was echoing. At breakfast one morning, Maya held up a tablet and tapped it with her spoon. They're calling you the Silent Lion of Wall Street. John chuckled behind his coffee. That's dramatic. Better than tired old man who finally noticed his family. She quipped. Daniel giggled beside her. You're both weird. John leaned back in his chair, savoring the moment, but it didn't last long. Raymond called that afternoon. There's movement, he said, voice clipped. John's spine straightened. On Lucas? Yes. His lawyers are pushing for an early plea, but that's not all. Someone's leaking. John's eyes narrowed. Leaking what? Parts of the family trust. Anonymous sources claiming that Daniel was always unfit, that you've been manipulated by external influence. Maya's name came up. John's blood ran cold. Raymond continued, they're trying to discredit her, saying you adopted her to stage some sort of redemption arc. That she's your puppet. John stood. Get me the editor of every outlet printing that. I want retractions. It's not that easy, Raymond warned. The story's in the wild now. Within hours, online forums swelled with speculation. Anonymous profiles debated whether Daniel should have ever been considered an heir. Comment threads argued over John's judgment. Some praised him, others called him soft. And always somewhere in the middle were whispers casting doubt on Maya, her motives, her past, her right to be beside them. That evening, Maya didn't come to dinner. John found her sitting on the stone bench by the koi pond, knees pulled to her chest, staring into the water. They're saying I'm fake, she said without looking up. That I'm just using you. You know that's not true, John replied gently. Yeah, but what if they never stop? Her voice cracked. What if everywhere I go, people just see me as the girl who exposed the golden boy? The one who ruined the family? John sat beside her. You didn't ruin anything. You saved it. She turned to him, eyes glassy. I didn't ask for all this. I just wanted Daniel to be safe. He placed a hand on her shoulder. And you did that. The noise will come and go. People forget headlines. But what Daniel remembers, the safety, the kindness, the cookies you shared behind the shelter, that stays. Maya wiped her nose with her sleeve. I missed the days nobody knew my name. John smiled. Me, too. But we can't unring the bell. All we can do is make the next sound count. The next day, John called a press conference. Cameras clicked as he stepped onto the podium outside the Mackenzie Foundation building. Flanked by Raymond and Maya, he spoke with steady calm. You've read the stories, he began. Some true, some twisted. I'm not here to silence speculation. I'm here to center the truth. He looked out over the crowd. My son, Daniel, was nearly erased from this family by deceit. The one who stopped it wasn't a lawyer or a journalist or a board member. It was a girl no one expected to matter. She mattered more than most of us did. Maya looked down, embarrassed. She didn't save my son for fame. She did it because it was right. And the truth has reminded me what leadership means. A reporter called out, Mr. Mackenzie, are you formally adopting her? John paused. Then he smiled. No papers needed. She's family. The crowd stirred with applause. Flashbulbs popped. But in that moment, the noise didn't matter. Back home that night, Daniel handed Maya a new drawing. In it, she wore a crown. Not a princess crown, but something sturdier, like a general's. Above it, in block letters, he'd written, Maya the Brave. She laughed. That's too much. John looked at it and shook his head. Not enough. That night, after Daniel went to sleep, Mia knocked softly on John's study door. I don't want to hide anymore, she said. John looked up from his desk. You don't have to. I want to speak, she continued. For kids like Daniel, for kids like me. Can the foundation do that? John stood and walked to her. It can and it will. She smiled. Then let's make some noise. The invitation came from a university in Boston, an annual summit on social justice, media, and youth advocacy. They wanted Maya to speak. Not John, not Raymond, Maya. We watched her press appearance. The dean had said she's not just brave, she's compelling. At first, Maya refused. I'm not a speaker, she muttered, turning the letter over in her hands like it might burn her fingers. I'm just a girl who saw something and yelled. John sat across from her at the breakfast table, stirring cream into his coffee. That's exactly why you should go. Maya looked up, unsure. What if I mess it up? What if I freeze? He leaned forward. Then you freeze. You own it, and then you start again. That's how truth works. It's not perfect. It's persistent. Daniel piped up from the next seat, cereal spoon halfway to his mouth. You talk good, just do that. Maya laughed. Thanks, Dan. The week leading up to the summit was a blur of practice sessions. Raymond coached her on structure. A young speechwriter from the foundation helped with phrasing, but Maya insisted on keeping it her own. I don't want to sound like someone else's idea of brave, she said. I want to sound like me. Oh. On the morning of the event, John and Daniel accompanied her to Boston. Maya wore a fitted gray blazer, her hair braided tightly back, small silver hoops in her ears. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. I look like I belong somewhere, she whispered. You do, John said. The auditorium was packed. Rows of professors, students, journalists, and advocates filled the seats. Cameras streamed the event online. When Ma's name was called, a hush fell over the room. She stepped up to the podium for a heartbeat. She said nothing, then softly. I'm not supposed to be here, she paused. I was supposed to stay invisible, quiet. That's what the world tells kids like me. That we survive by being small. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. But then I saw someone do something wrong, someone powerful. And I had a choice. Stay small or speak up. Her voice strengthened. The person they were hurting wasn't just anyone. He was my friend. He didn't speak like most people. He didn't fight back, but he felt everything. He was scared. And the worst part was no one was watching. She looked straight into the crowd. So I yelled. I made noise. And that noise saved him. A hush. I'm not a hero, she said. I'm just someone who stopped pretending not to see. Applause burst forward like a wave. Spontaneous, fierce, affirming. Maya blinked back tears. She smiled. After the event, reporters swarmed. Students asked for photos. One girl, barely older than Maya, hugged her tightly and whispered, "Thank you for being us." Back in the hotel room that night, John handed Mia a wrapped box. She opened it slowly to find a small glass sculpture, delicate, elegant figure of a girl holding a lantern high above her head. It's called the Signal, John said. I had it made for you. Maya touched it gently. She looks like she's still scared, but she's not backing down. He nodded. Exactly. Daniel bounced on the bed nearby. Is she going to be on television again? Maya laughed. Maybe, but next time I want you beside me. Daniel grinned. Okay, but I want chicken nuggets after. You got it. In the weeks that followed, Maya's speech went viral. Schools began requesting workshops. Non-profits called. A senator's office asked for her to testify on youth protections. The Truthwatch Foundation launched a campaign called Voices Unseen with Maya as its first ambassador. But amidst the growing attention, John kept their home grounded. He insisted on movie nights, on Daniel's gardening routine, on Sundays with pancakes and no phones. You're still a kid, he reminded Maya once. Let the world hear you, but don't let it own you. And yet, change was undeniable. Maya was no longer just a witness. She was becoming a force. At a quiet dinner with Raymond and a few board members, one of the older women leaned toward John and said, "She's more than a voice. She's a bridge." John nodded. And we need bridges more than ever. One evening, Maya found herself alone in the garden with Daniel. The lavender he'd planted months ago had bloomed, its soft purple stalks swaying in the wind. She would have liked this, he said. Your mom? He nodded. She liked flowers that don't give up. Maya sat beside him. Like you. Daniel was quiet for a long time. Then do you think Lucas misses us? Maya considered it. I think he misses something. Maybe not us. Maybe what he thought he'd have if he got everything. But that kind of winning never fills you up. Daniel looked down at the dirt. I hope he remembers the good parts. So do I, she said softly. As twilight settled over the garden, John watched them from the patio. His heart ached with something like peace. His family was healing. One bloom, one truth, one voice at a time. Autumn arrived quietly. The trees around the Mackenzie estate burned with amber and rust, their leaves falling like whispers across the gravel paths. Daniel had taken to collecting the most perfect ones, pressing them in heavy books and naming them after cartoon characters. Maya was different, too. She still laughed, still poked fun at John's old man sweaters. But her eyes were deeper now, more watchful. Since the Boston summit, requests poured in weekly. Television shows, podcasts, school events. Everyone wanted to hear the voice of the girl who spoke truth, but she'd started saying, "No, I don't want to be a symbol," she told John one morning, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to be a kid." Just for a while, he nodded. Being loud all the time doesn't make you brave. Knowing when to be quiet does. They'd settled into a new kind of rhythm. Maya started writing short stories, opinion pieces, letters she never sent. Daniel helped her brainstorm titles, most of them ridiculous. The Panda Revolution was his favorite. John smiled each time he found one of their drafts taped to the fridge. But silence, like autumn, had its own kind of weight. It came one night in the form of a letter, thin, crisp, printed on legal stationery. John read it under the dim light of his study lamp, his face growing pale as he reached the signature. Lucas, the letter came from a correctional facility upstate. It wasn't an apology. Not fully, but it was something. I thought if I won, I'd finally matter. I see now I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. But I do ask one thing. Let me see Daniel. John sat for a long time. He thought of Lucas as a boy, sharp, quiet, always watching. And then Lucas, the man angry, ambitious, broken in ways that power only sharpened. The next morning, John took the letter to Maya. He wants a visit, he said simply. She stared at the paper. After everything, he's still my son, John said. And Daniel's brother. Maya's expression was unreadable. What do you think Daniel would say? So they asked him. Daniel sat cross-legged on his bedroom rug, building a lopsided spaceship out of Legos. When John read him the letter, he didn't speak for a while. Then he said, "Can Ma come?" John blinked. Of course. And we bring cookies. John smiled. Deal. A week later, they drove to the facility. The walls were pale gray, the windows narrow. Maya kept her hand on Daniel's knee the entire ride. He didn't say much, just stared out the window with that far-off look he got when something didn't quite make sense. Inside, the visitation room was sterile, lined with metal chairs and plexiglass dividers. Lucas waited on the other side, thinner now, his eyes hollow, but alert. When Daniel stepped in, Lucas stood, then faltered. "Dan," he said, voice shaking. Daniel didn't move closer right away. He looked at Maya, then back at his brother. "Why'd you try to lose me?" Lucas sank into his chair. "Because I thought if you were gone, I'd finally be enough." Daniel tilted his head. "Enough for who?" Lucas swallowed hard. "Dad, myself? I don't know." There was silence. Maya's fingers tightened around Daniel's hand. "I was scared," Lucas admitted. "Of being second, of not being anything." Daniel walked up to the plexiglass. He placed his hand against it. Slowly, Lucas did the same. "I'm still your brother," Daniel said simply. Lucas's lips trembled. He nodded. They sat like that for several minutes, not speaking. Just existing on either side of the consequences. On the drive home, Daniel was quiet. Maya leaned against the window, watching rain streak down the glass. John spoke gently. "You don't have to understand him or forgive him, but what you did today, that was brave." Daniel looked up. "I didn't yell. I didn't fight." "No," John said. "You showed up. That's harder." Back home, Maya baked cookies while Daniel read from his new graphic novel. John opened his laptop and began drafting a letter of his own to a non-profit group that worked with incarcerated youth. "Maya," he called softly. "You ever thought about starting a program inside the prisons? Storytelling, testimony, even just listening?" She looked up from her mixing bowl, eyes gleaming. "I like the sound of that." He smiled. "Then let's build it." As the evening drew in and the fire in the hearth crackled with gentle warmth, the house felt fuller. Not because of noise or activity, but because of what was absent: shame, blame, fear. In its place, a fragile, growing trust, the kind that needed tending, like Daniel's pressed leaves. Or Maya's first draft stories. Before heading to bed, Daniel brought John a new drawing. It was the same three figures: him, Maya, John, but now behind them, a fourth, a shadowy figure off to the side, smaller, hands raised in apology. Underneath he'd written, "Almost family again." John swallowed hard, almost, but maybe someday. The cold had settled into the bones of the city. December arrived in Manhattan, not with gentle snow, but with biting winds and the kind of steel-gray skies that made everything look older, harsher. At the Mackenzie estate, however, warmth still lingered in the laughter echoing from the kitchen. In the piles of new books, Daniel insisted on reading aloud. And in Maya's cautious but steady smile, but even within that warmth, shadows moved. It started with a call from Raymond. "There's been a data breach," he said, voice sharp at the TruthWatch servers. "Internal documents, donor records, confidential testimony. Some of it's been leaked." John stood up from his desk. "How bad?" "Bad enough. Someone released a partial list of whistleblowers. Their stories are spreading on dark channels. Twisted. Anonymous threats have been sent. One of the families pulled out of the program entirely." John's stomach dropped. "Maya, she's not mentioned yet, but the source of the breach, it came through an old Mackenzie and Lang internal login, one that belonged to Lucas." Silence stretched thin between them. Could he still access it? John asked finally. "Not officially, but if he stored credentials or shared them," John's voice was low. "We need to contain this now." That night, after Daniel went to sleep, John sat Maya down in the study and explained everything. Her face hardened, not with fear, but with something sharper: betrayal. "He's still trying to tear things down," she said. "Even from inside a cage." "We don't know for sure it was him," John offered. She shook her head. "That login didn't leak itself." Over the next few days, the Foundation's tech team worked around the clock. Firewalls were rebuilt. Private documents were locked behind new encryption. Maya insisted on sitting in on every update call, asking precise, sometimes uncomfortable questions. At one point, she turned to the head of cybersecurity and asked, "Do you think anyone inside helped him?" The woman hesitated. "It's possible someone had to authorize an old credential reactivation." Maya looked at John, "Someone we trusted." Trustance broke and left a silence even louder than betrayal. By the end of the week, the leak had stopped spreading. With Raymond's help, legal action was launched to protect the victims named. Public statements were carefully released. The press surprisingly treated the Foundation with respect, perhaps because the public still remembered the voice that had once yelled at a dock and shook the legacy of a billion-dollar empire. But the damage had been done. John walked in on Maya crying in the hallway late one night. She wasn't sobbing. It was quieter than that, a silent unraveling. "I thought I'd built something safe," she whispered. John sat beside her. You did. And that's exactly why someone wanted to break it. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. I'm tired of fighting. I know, he said, but you're not alone. Later that week, Daniel approached Maya with a notebook. Can I tell my story, too? Maya blinked. What do you mean? He held it out. Inside were drawings written in his uneven handwriting. Moments from his past, the shelter, the parks he and Maya used to hide in. The day Lucas said they were going on a boat. Each page raw. Real. I want people to know what it felt like, he said. Even if they don't get it. Maya hugged him so tightly he squeaked. That was the spark. Over the next few days, Maya and Daniel started working on a new project. Not just advocacy, but testimony, visual stories, video journals, not just about being victims, but about surviving, about growing up different and still deserving the world. John watched from the sidelines with cautious pride. He didn't guide this work. He supported it. This was their fight now, shaped on their terms. But even as things settled, another letter arrived from Lucas. Shorter this time, just one sentence scrolled in a less careful hand. I didn't mean for them to get hurt. No signature, no apology. Maya read it once and folded it neatly. He doesn't get to say that, she said. John agreed. But he also knew that letters like these were never really about guilt. They were about absolution. And some people didn't get that, not when they had torn others apart in pursuit of power. By the end of December, the foundation hosted a small private event, a roundtable discussion between young advocates, many of whom had once been silenced. Maya moderated. Daniel sat beside her, clutching his notebook. They didn't speak as heroes. They spoke as people wounded, real, growing. When Maya closed the event, she looked into the small crowd and said, "They tried to shut us up with shame, but we told our stories anyway, and you listened." That's how it starts. That's how it keeps going. Afterward, as snow began to fall lightly outside, John watched Maya and Daniel laugh with the other kids over hot cocoa and cookies. The light from the room bounced off the windows, reflecting their silhouettes in soft motion. This was the real inheritance. Not the company, not the estate, but the voice that would not go quiet, and the courage to pass it on. The new year began not with fireworks, but with quiet. Snow blanketed the estate in thick folds of white, muting every sound into a soft hush. Daniel spent mornings making snow creatures with mismatched hats, while Maya often stood by the window watching him with a steaming mug in her hand. John, meanwhile, spent hours in the study, poring over old documents, business contracts, estate plans, handwritten notes from years ago. He'd never feared mortality, but lately he felt a need to organize things, to leave nothing behind in confusion. Too much had been left unspoken in his life already, too many assumptions. One morning, he called Maya and Daniel into the study. I want to talk about the will, he said gently. Maya raised an eyebrow. You're not dying, are you? Not any faster than usual, he chuckled. But it's time we talk about what comes next. Daniel looked up from his sketchbook. What do you mean? John folded his hands. Legally, I've updated everything. The estate, the foundation, the assets. But that's not what I really wanted to talk about. I want to talk about inheritance. Sino, just the money kind. Maya sat forward listening. I spent most of my life building a name, he said. Mackenzie was supposed to mean something, but I let that name blind me. I let pride and structure outweigh truth than you. He looked at Maya, showed me how much louder honesty could be. And Daniel, you reminded me that gentleness isn't weakness. Daniel smiled shyly. So, I've made a decision. The Foundation Truth Watch is yours, Maya. In name, in vision, in direction. I'll remain on the board, but I want you to lead it when you're ready. Maya's eyes widened. Me? John nodded. You already have in the company? She asked. John looked at Daniel. Mackenzie and Lang will continue, but under a different structure, a trust, one that ensures inclusion, equity, and long-term ethical oversight. Daniel won't be a CEO, but he'll always have a seat at the table. Because legacy isn't just strategy, it's compassion. Daniel beamed. Can I bring snacks to the meetings? John laughed. Absolutely. They talked for hours after that about plans, dreams, safeguards. Maya made notes furiously, already thinking of people she wanted on the board. Daniel drew doodles of what he thought the new logo should look like. Most included dinosaurs and spaceships. But change, even when chosen, came with ripple effects. The next week, an old partner from the business world reached out. His tone was polite but condescending. You're really putting a teenager and a boy with limitations in charge of the family empire? He asked over speakerphone. You don't think that's dangerous? John didn't hesitate. I think what's dangerous is assuming old models of power still serve a world that's changing. He hung up before the man could respond. That evening, John told Maya about the call. She listened, jaw tight. You know, people are going to question everything. Let them, John replied. We'll show them what leadership looks like now. But he also knew they'd need allies. So, he arranged a meeting, not with CEOs or donors, but with community leaders, educators, youth organizers, even former whistleblowers the foundation had supported. They gathered in a modest hall in Queens, seated in a circle instead of rows. No podium, no stage. Maya opened the meeting. We're not here to impress anyone, she began. We're here to build something better. Not from the top down, from the inside out. They listened. They offered ideas. One teacher suggested mobile storytelling workshops. A former foster youth proposed a mentorship program. An older man who'd once exposed corruption in his union said, "What you're building, it's not just a foundation, it's a movement." John sat in the back, silent and proud. After the meeting, Maya found him by the coffee table. Did you ever think we'd be here? She asked. No, he admitted. But I'm glad we are. Daniel ran up, waving a flyer. They let me design the logo for the youth branch. Mia peered at it. Is that a raccoon with a cape? Daniel nodded enthusiastically. Truth raccoon, he sees everything. She laughed. Perfect. As winter deepened, the house became a different kind of headquarters. John's study turned into a planning room. The guest house became Maya's workspace. Daniel's art began appearing in foundation newsletters. Staff visited weekly, blending business with laughter. Yet through all the growth, something remained untouched. Lucas John received another letter, this one shorter than the last. Just a drawing, a small stick figure alone under a dark sky. No caption, no signature, just a folded page sent from a prison upstate. John tucked it into a drawer. For now, that night, as the wind howled outside and frost lined the windows, Maya stood by the fire with Daniel. Do you think we're really changing anything? She asked. Daniel looked at her with quiet confidence. We changed, Dad? She smiled. Yeah, we did. And as they turned in for the night, John stood by the window, watching the snow fall across the garden at the same place where lavender bloomed just months ago. Some seeds take longer to grow, but the ones that endure rewrite legacies. Spring arrived late, but when it did, it burst onto the grounds of the Mackenzie estate with an almost stubborn beauty. The trees bloomed defiantly, the same way the people inside the home had bloomed over the past month, slowly, with effort, and against long odds. Maya stood barefoot in the garden, the earth cool beneath her feet. Her hands were smeared with soil from planting a row of sunflowers. Daniel's latest idea. Sunflowers follow the light, he had said. They always find it. She looked over to see Daniel humming as he painted small signs for each plant, naming them ridiculous things like Captain Petal and Sir Leafington. The way he moved, now lighter friar, was a quiet testament to healing. Inside the house, John sat with Raymond over tea, reviewing the final paperwork for the leadership transition. The foundation structure was solid. The new board was diverse, ethically selected, and most importantly believed in the mission, not the money. You've really done it, Raymond said, glancing at the signed papers. You've rewritten what legacy means. John leaned back, the lines on his face deeper now, but filled with something resolute. Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we grow while we're still here. Later that afternoon, a call came in. The warden from Lucas's facility, Mr. Mackenzie, I thought you'd want to know. Lucas is being considered for a transfer. Minimum security. He's been cooperating, attending therapy. He's asking for a meeting. John listened quietly, eyes out the window. Would he like me to visit? John asked. He said he doesn't expect anything, but he left your name on the list. John ended the call and sat for a long while, the weight of memory tugging at him. That evening after dinner, he told Maya and Daniel. Daniel was quiet. Is he better now? John sighed. I don't know, but maybe he's trying. Maya crossed her arms. What does he want from us? Maybe just to be seen again, John replied. Mia looked away, conflicted. He hurt us, John. He put Daniel on that boat like he was luggage. He tried to erase both of us. I know, John said softly. And he'll live with that. But people aren't one chapter. They're the whole book. Maybe he's trying to rewrite his ending. Daniel looked between them. Can we go together? Maya blinked. You want to? Daniel nodded. I want to see if his eyes are different now. So they went. The prison was less imposing than the last, but still filled with the heavy silence of consequence. In the visitation room, Lucas sat alone at the far table, hands clasped tightly, eyes down. When he looked up and saw them, he stood but didn't speak. Daniel approached first. He pulled out a small paper from his jacket, a drawing. This one was of 4 stick figures, all holding hands under a tree. One of them had a crack down the middle of its body, but a small heart drawn inside it. I drew you, Daniel said. Lucas took it with trembling hands. Why? Daniel shrugged. Because you're still part of the picture. Lucas didn't cry. He didn't break down, but his hands gripped the paper like it was a lifeline. Maya stayed back for a moment, watching. Her guard was up, but her breath had softened. She finally stepped forward and spoke. You can't undo what you did. I know, Lucas said, his voice low. But if you want to do better, she continued, it has to start with telling the truth. Lucas nodded. I will. I've been writing everything down for the court. For the foundation for you. John stepped forward then, placing a hand on Lucas's shoulder. Then let that be your work. No more shadows. The visit was short, but something shifted. A circle once broken had started, just barely, to close again. Back home, Maya found herself sitting in the garden long after sunset. The sunflowers hadn't bloomed yet, but the promise of them hovered in the air. John joined her, handing her a cup of tea. You did something remarkable today. I didn't forgive him, she said. You didn't have to, he replied. You faced him. That's something most people never do. She sipped her tea, eyes on the horizon. I keep thinking about the drawing Daniel made, the crack with the heart inside. John smiled. He sees people clearer than we do. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you think we're finally safe now? He thought for a long moment. I think we've stopped running. That's a kind of safety. Later that week, Maya was invited to speak at the National Youth Justice Conference in Washington, D.C. She almost declined. She was tired. The world's still noisy, but Daniel reminded her. If you don't tell the story, someone else will, and they won't get it right. She agreed. At the conference, she stood in front of a crowd of thousands: educators, survivors, lawmakers. She spoke not about trauma but about continuity, about how justice isn't an event. It's a process. I'm not here because I was brave. She said, I'm here because I was believed, because someone listened. Because someone like Daniel reminded me that even broken people belong in the picture. The applause thundered. That night, back at the hotel, she found a letter slipped under her door. No signature, just a single line in handwriting she now recognized. The picture's not finished, but I'm still drawing. Maya smiled. The sunflowers back home were probably starting to crack through the soil. The light always found its way in. Summer returned with a quiet insistence. The days lengthened, the air thickened with warmth, and the scent of cut grass. At the edge of the Mackenzie estate, the garden had transformed. The sunflowers Daniel and Maya had planted months before now stood tall, golden heads tilted proudly toward the sky. Each one a small act of defiance of belief. Maya stood in the center of them one morning, fingers brushing against the soft edges of a blossom. Behind her, Daniel was setting up a small easel and canvas humming off-key. His painting today was titled The Tallest Petal. John watched them from the veranda, a glass of iced tea in hand, a subtle smile curving his lips. This was peace. Not the sterile kind that came from silence, but the earned kind grown in messy soil, watered by hardship. Inside, the final touches were being prepared for the Foundation's grand summer event. The theme, Voices That Built Us. It would be a celebration of the people behind the movement, witnesses, whistleblowers, kids like Daniel, guardians like Maya. The board had unanimously voted to rename the Central Fellowship Program the Maya Initiative. Maya protested at first. "This isn't just about me." "But it started with you," John had said. "Let them remember that the event was scheduled to be held outdoors under lanterns and open sky." John had insisted it not be in a hotel or ballroom. "Truth doesn't belong behind walls," he'd said. "It belongs where people can see the stars." That evening, the grounds were lit with soft golden light, rows of wooden chairs, white linen-covered tables, and a small platform framed by sunflowers made the setting feel less like a gala and more like a family gathering. Guests arrived from all over. Teachers, social workers, young activists, former inmates who'd found second chances. Maya took a deep breath before walking out. She wore a pale blue dress that Daniel had picked for her, claiming it looked like the sky on good days. Her speech was tucked in her pocket, though she wasn't sure if she'd read it. As she stepped up to the podium, the audience quieted. Lanterns swayed gently above, casting a soft glow across the faces below. She didn't look at her notes. "When I was 13, she began. I thought the only way to survive was to disappear, to be so quiet no one could hurt me. And then one day, I yelled." Soft laughter rippled. "I didn't yell because I was brave. I yelled because I was scared. But someone listened, and that changed everything." She looked toward Daniel, who grinned and held up his sketchpad, a sunflower with arms, giving a thumbs up. "This movement isn't about noise," Maya continued, "it's about notice, about refusing to look away. We don't fix the world by shouting over each other. We fix it by facing the broken pieces together and daring to believe they still belong." The audience rose in applause. Not the polite kind, but the kind that comes from being seen. After the speeches, the music started gentle, soulful, full of old warmth. Daniel danced with one of the fellows, twirling and laughing until he nearly collapsed from joy. John moved from table to table, speaking softly with guests, thanking them. Maya stood by the edge of the garden, watching it all unfold. She felt a hand on her shoulder. "You did good, kid," Raymond said, his voice gruff as always, but gentler now. She smiled. "We all did." He looked around. "You know what? I see an open bar." He chuckled. "That, too. But mostly I see people who got a second chapter because you demanded the first one be read out loud." As the night deepened, a car arrived at the estate. It was unexpected. From it stepped a familiar figure, slimmer, quieter, almost shy Lucas. He stood at the edge of the light. Unsure, John walked to meet him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "You're late." Lucas gave a small, nervous smile. "I wasn't sure I should come, but you did," John said. Lucas looked toward the garden where Daniel was now showing off his latest drawing to a group of kids. Maya stood nearby, her laughter like wind chimes in summer. "Can I just watch from here?" Lucas asked. John nodded. For now, they stood side by side in silence. The same distance that once felt like a canyon now felt like a path waiting to be walked. Later, as the crowd thinned and the lanterns began to dim, Maya joined them. She looked at Lucas, her expression unreadable. "You're quiet," she said, trying to listen more, he replied. She nodded. "Good start." Daniel trotted over with 2 sunflower cupcakes. "One for you," he told Lucas, "and one for the picture." Lucas took it, eyes misting. Maya turned toward the garden, the blooms now glowing faintly under the moonlight. "You know," she said, "I used to think sunflowers were silly, too bright, too needy." "And now?" John asked. She smiled. "Now I think they're warriors. They rise anyway." Even after storms, Daniel raised his cupcake. To the warriors, they clinked their desserts together. And beneath a sky of 1,000 stars, the family that shouldn't have existed, built on broken trust, fierce truth, and unlikely love, stood together. Not perfect, not finished, but facing the light. The story teaches us that true strength lies not in power or status, but in the courage to speak up, the humility to listen, and the willingness to forgive. It reminds us that healing is possible even after betrayal, and that legacy is not built by control, but by compassion. Through the voices of the unheard, justice finds its way. And often the quietest truths are the ones that change everything. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the BUP Stories channel for more inspiring tales that touch the heart.